I'd like to begin with a sort of apology for anyone that has genuinely clicked on this video after seeing the title and just wants to know if Dune has a post-credits scene. So if you are one of those people, I do not look down on you. I do not see you as inferior to me in any way just because you want this one piece of information. In fact, in some ways you're probably superior because you're not blundering about life, filling your head full of rubbish. You want to know one thing and you want to go to the most direct way towards it. Now, I don't know why you'd be in this video, but the next sort of, well, the good part of an hour perhaps, depends how long I talk about it, I'm gonna be talking about art and content and what I call sludge, and possibly the Freudian death drive, even though I'm not very knowledgeable about it. So if you're interested in that, skip around. But if you really just want to know if Dune has a post-credit sequence, then I'm going to timestamp this video and I will say at the very end, whether it does. So you can just click straight to that right now, okay? I won't take it personally, no offence, you're fine, you're good. If you're here for the talk, then buckle up, sunshine. It's time. So, hello to all the people that want talk. I think we got rid of all those horrible, stupid cretins that are entertaining the possibility of whether Dune has a post-credit sequence. You know, I feel dirty just even having their click. They're scum. So, but I'm with you now, the learned people that wanna know things, really wanna kind of be with me, a person who somehow makes a living teaching in higher education, part of a living anyway. So yes, I've written my latest essay. By the way, my name is Niall. I'm a poet who writes essays and gives talks because the muses abandoned me. And I found myself, as you all do, scrolling through my phone the other day and just completely feeling at a loss. And it's very easy with my phone. I mean, I've got a timer on it right now because I've got 50 something minutes left in this SD card, in this camera. But when I'm on my phone and I'm feeling restless, I can pick it up and I can just swipe to the right. It's a Pixel phone, so I'm not advertising Pixel phones because this thing, the latest Android update broke voice calls, so I don't recommend it until Google does something about it. So I have to roll back to the last version. But anyway, when I'm on this phone, what I can do, and I don't know if iPhone users can do this, but I can swipe my thumb to the right and it loads up this Google feed, which is curated by all the bots that have been spying on my viewing habits, all those cookies over the years, and therefore is serving me stuff that, it's not serving me stuff that it'll think will interest me, of course. It's serving me stuff that will keep me engaged, keep me scrolling, keep me going through it. And so I do this one swipe to the right, like that, and then I scroll upwards, and things fly across my field of vision, and I'm idly scrolling with my thumb, and then something arrests my attention for a second, therefore cutting into this kind of constant drive to repeat this action, and then I hit on the thumbnail, and then some dopamine floods into my brain, maybe a little bit. I don't know how it works. I know a little bit too much is made of dopamine sometimes, and then I'm in there and I'm reading an article, and then maybe I can use this thumb again to swipe the other way. And if I swipe the other way, it brings me back to that feed and I can keep scrolling upwards again. And as much as I like to portray myself as an enlightened man, as much as I try to portray myself as a man who is at ease and comfortable within his own existence, you bet there's times that I end up just scrolling through that feed. To be fair, one situation in which I do this, because I think I am able these days to just stand there and do nothing. I can do that for a very long amount of time, no problem. I can feel the urge to take my phone out of my pocket, and sometimes I might even put my hand into my pocket and just feel the wonderful tactile feeling of this sort of grippy case that I have that feels almost paper-like, while feeling protective of my phone at the same time. So that's a weird repetitive behaviour that I embark upon. But then I kind of stop and I take my hand out again, so I can stand there just like that for a while, just with my own thoughts. It's not a problem for me. It's just I've been able to train myself up to be able to do that kind of thing. But when I'm at the school gates, I have to say, I end up taking my phone out. And one reason why is that if I just stand there without a phone in my hand, while everyone else has got a phone in their hand, it draws attention to me. And I've got to say that I don't really like, in that kind of situation, having attention drawn to me. People are registering that I am this man who's not there, glued to his phone. And there's something therefore untrustworthy about me, and maybe even sinister about me. So so I tend to just take my phone out in order to not have the attention at the same time. And someone even has gone up to me and said this line like, "Ooh, what are you thinking?" Which it's up there with "what are you reading?" as things you don't want people to come up and say to you. I mean, yeah, we all know the cliches about, men who are thinking about Rome. I tend not to be thinking about Rome. I tend to genuinely be there, just occupying the moment, keeping a pretty clear head, and just feeling alive. That's what I tend to fill my silent moments with, and thoughts come in and out, and it's great. I don't need to kind of sit on a cushion and stare at a wall in order to have this experience. You can have this experience anytime. It's on tap, people. It's on tap. So, but again, social awkwardness dictates that I take my phone out. Now, obviously, I'll still do that at other times, but when I do find myself in that, that's it. I'm in the clutches. I'm in the clutches of this particular drive, scrolling through, and I am still aware to a point that this is not trying to bring me stuff that I would like, that would enrich my life. It's bringing me stuff that keeps me engaged. It's purpose. The purpose of my phone, or the software on my phone in that moment, is to stop me putting this back into my pocket. But every now and again, the spell is broken. And in the essay I wrote about this on my button down, because this is what I do. I write an essay, post it on the Friday, and I make no promises about this, but I try my best, if my family situation allows it, to give a little talk and tape it on a Saturday morning, post it on a Sunday. I can't guarantee that. The essay's guaranteed. The essay is the thing that I want to be punished for if I miss it. The video's a bonus, but I really like doing it. So anyway, back to me and my phone and the feed and all the things I scroll upwards about. So yes, it's something I mentioned in my essay. So there's a little moment where the mechanics are almost laid bare, and I compare it to the point that always freaked me out when I was a kid, when I'd watch Buck Rogers or any other sci-fi TV show or movie, when there's normally an android character. Sometimes we don't even know they're a human, and it wasn't like Terminator, where you've got the flesh and blood and it slowly reveals itself. It's more this thing where the person would like Westworld, the old Westworld, where they would like kind of grab their face and just take their face off, and you would see all the wires and the LEDs and all the beepy things underneath. And so where you projected the soul within this thing, you're actually just seeing the crude mechanics. I mean, to be fair, we would be just as alarmed if someone took off their face and we just saw, if we saw this complete bisection of their, what's actually inside their skull as well. We kind of project things into people in the same way that we project things into ourselves. That's something I'm going to talk about another time. I want to get back to the thing that drew attention to this crude mechanic. And the thing that drew attention to this crude mechanic was an article that said, does Dune 2 have a post-credit scene? And I immediately found this ridiculous. Obviously, it's like, because I know the kind of film that has a post-credit scene, and Dune 2, which is a film that is trying to portray itself as a serious piece of sci-fi fantasy cinema based on a very respected work of literature, it is obviously not going to cheapen what it is doing with a post-credit scene. So I did start positing what would happen if it was like a Marvel multiverse, or DC multiverse for that matter, one of these cinematic sort of gimmicks, which looks like it's burnt itself out, thank goodness. But what would it be? What would this scene be if there was just this sudden, you're in a cinema, the credits are rolling upwards, the poor attendants are waiting to get in to tidy up before the next lot come in, and might accidentally knock over a cup of pee while they're doing it, because that's what people do in cinemas. The Brixton Ritzy has one particular screen that stinks. Because of this habit, someone obviously is regular enough to do that in that screen. But anyway, back to back to the attendance. I'm watching the credits, Dune 2, and then all of a sudden the screen lights up again and we have a scene, because there's always a jolt to that post-credit scene, and it shows, you know, Paul Atreides and Chani and Princess Irulan and whoever else is there, and they're all sitting around a table, and then all, you know, maybe they're just chatting away, and then all of a sudden someone says, "Room for one more," and they look around, and it's Duke, is it Leo Atreides? I can't remember. Leo Leto Atreides, and he's there, played by Oscar Isaac, and everyone's like, "Oh!" And then Paul Muad'Dib, or Paul Atreides, says, "Dad, you're alive, but how?" "No time, son. I'll tell you on the way." "On the way? Where are we going?" And then Oscar Isaac sort of looks into the camera and says, "Tatooine." Fade to black. Whoa! What, man? Oh my god! I sometimes watch those videos of Americans in cinemas watching Marvel films and just shouting. It's almost like they're aware they're being filmed. This is why we have to hold on to our own cultures, because this cultural imperialism could infect all of us. In the UK, people just scroll their phones at the cinema screenings instead normally, which is really annoying. I've spoken about that in previous videos. So I find it absurd. Why is it absurd? Why does it exist? Why does it? Who in their right mind? Now, there might be, maybe, there's people who are just very casual, and maybe they are aware of post-credit scenes. Maybe they only watch Marvel films in the cinema, and therefore have begun to project the idea of a post-credit scene onto every film that they watch. Does Phantom Thread have a post-credit scene? Does Derek Jarman's Blue have a post-credit scene? There's a helicopter outside. I think Derek Jarman's Blue is just the end point, really, isn't it? But if you don't know, it's a film by the artistic filmmaker Derek Jarman, which has just a blue screen all the way through. He has a post-credit scene where everything goes red. I don't know. So I'm getting back to it. But really, the reason why it exists is because there is a sludginess to the internet. We go back to that feeling of being outside the school gates, not wanting anyone to interrogate us about being a weirdo who sits there being content, stands there being content with life and feeling alive. They need you to replicate the behaviour that they're doing so that everyone can just feel comfortable again for a moment. That sounds really patronising, doesn't it? And it is. So I wonder why it exists, and I guess it exists because you can just that's a job of someone's job is to just find as many films as they can and write an article asking if there's a post-credit sequence, mainly because it will bring in clicks. And by the way, yeah, I attacked in the essay I attacked the term click, so I'll do this right now. There's such a thing as a dead metaphor. A dead metaphor is a phrase that we use. It's almost a cliche, but it's a bit different, because a cliche can still be relevant. We still know what a bull in a china shop is. It's not because there was a time when a bull was in a china shop and it used to happen all the time, but it doesn't happen anymore, and we lost the meaning of it. So a dead metaphor tends to be a phrase that we use which no longer has a specific meaning to what it might refer to, because we've moved on technologically or whatever, or the thing that's kind of that it refers to is just not done anymore, but we've carried on referring to it as something else, as a metaphor. So and one of my students pointed out to me, actually, which is one of my favourite examples of a dead metaphor, is stay tuned. When someone's on a YouTube video, I just spoke like Boris Johnson, on a YouTube video, but someone's on a YouTube video and they say stay tuned, and even on a modern TV they'll say stay tuned, or on a modern radio. And of course stay tuned normally relates to the dial, isn't it, where you tune in and out of channels and the dial goes across and you get all this interference, white noise on the radio or on a TV screen, and then you hit the signal and there it is. I still remember having TVs that did that, and so we don't tune into things anymore, really. But we still say stay tuned. So that in itself is a dead metaphor. It doesn't really refer to it anymore. And I think that the term click has become a dead metaphor too. I think that click is this idea of having a mouse and a cursor and a pointer, And it feels so clinical when we click on something, but really we don't click. We swipe and then we jab. And I think this article saying it brings in clicks is disingenuous in a way, because I think the environment that most people find themselves in is they're navigating some kind of feed and they jab on the article. Now, these articles are written ultimately because there is a perceived need. They'll just get churned out about every film that comes out to a certain profile. And what they'll do is that they will be full of search engine optimization terms, SEO. So these are things that Google trawls the internet, and these articles are full of things that get Google's attention and let Google know that this thing probably has what the information that is needed from the person who is searching for this particular thing. But the problem is that these articles don't have that at all. So they've just learned how to trick Google into thinking that. So, of course, I was curious. So I clicked on it. I clicked on even though, I think I had a very good inkling as to whether Dune 2 has a post-credit scene. I jabbed the thumbnail. Now, maybe you're not aware of how these things work, but you might think, oh, so you jab the thumbnail. Does it tell you immediately? Believe it or not, no. For some reason, the first paragraph, well, there is a reason. The first paragraph instead tells you what Dune Part 2 is. It describes Dune Part 2, because I guess some people are clicking on the article who don't know what a Dune Part 2 is. So that's what it's doing. It's giving you the information about what a Dune Part 2 is. So once that's done, after that paragraph's finished, now you're thinking, maybe now it gives us the information. No, it doesn't. No, shame on you. Shame on you for thinking about all those people, yes, who don't know what Dune Part 2 is, but you're not thinking about all the people who don't know what a post-credit sequence is, a post-credit scene, a post-credit sting, as it's also known. You're bad. So yes, of course, there's a paragraph as well. And then finally, after that, to be fair, they say, and they say that, I mean, this is a spoiler for the end of this video, but they say that Dune Part 2 doesn't have a post-credit scene. In fact, they say, unsurprisingly, Dune Part 2 doesn't have a post-credit scene. Unsurprisingly, that says so many things, doesn't it? It tells you that a human wrote the article, but maybe the human could be saying something like, I don't know, it feels loaded, that unsurprisingly, almost like they're either apologising for writing the article or calling you an idiot for jabbing that thumbnail. So that was the extent of the article. And I just think it's very interesting that exists, really. Someone has a job to write it. I don't know how much money it brings in. Obviously now we can, without being facetious, the whole point is you don't want to give the information away in the first paragraph, because that will show up on the Google search and then no one has to click on the article. So you have to make sure that when someone clicks on the article, they have to scroll past a couple of adverts. And that's the mission. Noam Chomsky famously said that newspapers don't exist to bring news to people, they exist to bring people to advertisers. And so that's what these articles do as well. It's about the article, it's about the advertising. Someone might click on the advert because they're that distractible. They might click on something weird on Temu or something like that, and then mission accomplished. The website has made a bit of money. That's what the internet has become, unfortunately. And that's the purpose for it. So the point I made in my essay is that this is what I would call sludge. Something that just fills up that urge to scroll, just to fill a gap that doesn't necessarily need to be filled. It identifies the gap and goes, there's the gap, fills it up, tries to extract value from that gap. And the argument I went on to make, ultimately, was I looked at the post-credit scene itself and how the post-credit scene started off as something surprising. So if you have earlier films from the 80s, like Flash Gordon, when Max von Sydow's body double or hand double, after the credits have rolled, so he's Ming the Merciless, he's just been impaled on a rocket, spoilers, by Flash Gordon. I think he has green or purple blood or something like that, and then he kind of dies and I can't remember if he vanishes or not, but he dies. And then a robot comes up to Flash Gordon, if I remember right, and says, "Hail, Flash Gordon, saviour of the universe!" And Flash Gordon jumps up and goes, "Yes!" like that, and his hands like that. It's a cool shot. Anyway, credits roll, and then after the credits have rolled, Ming's hand comes into shot and grabs his powerful ring and pulls it out of shot, and he laughs. Ah, 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 ah. Oh, Ming ain't dead yet. Fade to black. Masters of the Universe, 1987, I do believe, with Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella. And is it Courtney Cox as well? I think so. He-Man's beaten Skeletor. Frank Langella's got this, I remember this, he's got this makeup, this very rubbery makeup, because it's an 80s film, they can't do the CGI, and it's very difficult to make a human being look like a skeleton. So he's got this rubbery makeup with this kind of black hole. And the funny thing about Frank Langella's makeup is he really looks like Jack Palance, and you can't help but think, you've gone to all that effort to put all that makeup on to look like Jack Palance. You could have, and he even kind of sounds like Jack Palance as well at the end of the film. But you could have just put some like Day of the Dead makeup on Jack Palance and just put all that latex to the side. Just a bit of face paint, carnival face paint, and you would have had the same effect, I think. But anyway, end of the film. Skeletor's been tossed into this kind of lurid pink water, and at the end of the film, credits finish, establishing shots of the lurid pink water, and then poor old Frank Langella pops out of the water in full makeup, full skeletal makeup, and says, "I'll be back," like Jack Palance. Anyway, and then it freezes immediately afterwards, almost as if he basically went, "I'll be back. Give me the I hate this job." You know what I mean? It's like the meltdown happened immediately afterwards, so they had to freeze it. So, where was I? The point is, and also I think young Sherlock Holmes had a reveal that the baddie was Moriarty all along, because he writes it in a hotel guest book. So these films had these things, but nobody knew. There wouldn't necessarily be word of mouth at school. Whole audiences would watch these films, leave, and not know that there was a post-credit sequence, and you'd only see it when you watched the film on TV, if the TV didn't cut out immediately, as they do sometimes, or speed up the credits. And so you'd only know when you watched it on TV years later. And then we get to the 2000s. I can't remember the year. I think Iron Man only came out like sort of just over 10 years ago, didn't it? But Iron Man famously has perhaps one of the most famous post-credit scenes ever made, when Samuel Jackson steps out from the shadows and says, "Nick Fury, I'm from S.H.I.E.L.D." And it was huge. I mean, firstly, Iron Man was a bigger hit than people thought it would be, because Iron Man was not necessarily a big intellectual property from Marvel. Marvel had kind of sold off its biggest ones to other people, such as Spider-Man and the X-Men, to other studios. So it was a surprise, and I found that there were articles were written about the post-credit scene, and also people would speak about it on social media. And then some people went in with their potato phones, and it was the end of the film, so the ushers probably didn't care, and they just recorded this last bit and put it on YouTube. It was genuinely surprising. Now, I quite like some of the earlier Marvel films. My Marvel snobbery is going to come out now, and I quite like some of the I like the first Spider-Man Marvel film, because it's quite a small self-contained story, and I think when they do small and self-contained, I think the Marvel films can be quite good. Much like Spider-Man 2 and sort of X-Men 2, two of the best comic book movies made, had that self-containedness. They weren't part of some outward branching cinematic universe and having to keep so many plates spinning. They could focus on the drama of that particular situation. But there was definitely a point. I've spoken about the sludginess of the internet and sludginess of these articles. There was a point when all of a sudden the post-credit scene was just something that was expected. And it's particularly joyless. It's just something that has to be put in. And I think around that time, when we started expecting this from the Marvel films, that's when the Marvel films became their own kind of sludge. And I think I started noticing this when I was watching Marvel movies and I'd enjoy the film. But then the last sort of 20-30 minutes would become this typical rushed CGI spectacle with very high stakes, and I would just immediately become very bored. I would notice how bored I was, and I wouldn't really care about the end of the film. If anything, the post-credit scene at least normally brought the characters back to earth in some way, I guess. I guess that's one of the redeeming things about it. And then slowly I noticed that the the period of boredom that I would inhabit in this film would get longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. And this came to a head when I watched Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And I didn't watch it in a cinema, I watched it on Disney Plus with my wife. And I remember that I was kind of excited because it's a Sam Raimi film, and I like all the Evil Dead films. I like a lot of Sam Raimi stuff. I liked the first 2 Spider-Man films. So I thought, this could be good. And there were quite a few little Sam Raimi flourishes in the first 20 minutes. But then it just quickly became sludge. It just quickly became, for so many reasons, I wasn't involved in the story. It didn't really hold together. It was also a continuation of WandaVision, which I thought was fantastic, but similarly, kind of a final episode, it went Marvel. It was really interesting, and then it just went the same way. It just fell into itself, collapsed into standard Marvel behaviour at the end. But I still wanted to see where it went, and I think what they did with the character was also a sort of betrayal, in a way, of what had happened before. She just immediately just went into baddie mode in this film and stayed there, and wasn't as interesting. But I found myself drifting in and out. I wasn't sleeping. My wife was. She fell asleep after 20 minutes. Snored through it. I've still got a helicopter outside as well. I don't know if that's Disney. I'm just looking at how long I've got. I'm really talking quite... I have the gift of the gab. I will talk about the Blarney Stone in a later episode. I did kiss the Blarney Stone when I was younger. But I'll go on about that another time. So it felt like sludge. And I think that's what happened with Marvel. Marvel became its own sludge. And as I say in the essay, we have another word for sludge. Sludge is something that just fills a gap. And I think that's what it is. I think sometimes, and I think that's what differentiates it between Dune Part 2, which I haven't seen yet, even though I know that it has no post-credit sequence. And I think the difference between something like Dune Part 2 and the latest Marvel thing to kind of be just churned out is that Dune Part 2 is there because someone really wanted to make it. I know that sounds simplistic, but Dune was this great, this novel which was a singular vision of Frank Herbert, and then the thing about turning that into a film became an obsession with many filmmakers. David Lynch attempted it, but knew straight away from his exposure to the studio system that he was going to fail. And I still like the David Lynch Dune, but it is a failure. And I think it's in some ways the David Lynch Dune, for all of its big studio problems, still kind of has a bit of a heart to it. But I think ultimately Denis Villeneuve's version of Dune, you can tell it's a labour of love. You can tell it's something that he made because he was rising to a challenge. And I think that's really what kind of makes it still a work of art. Now, when Doctor Strange and the Mountain, that's another film completely, and the Multiverse of Madness came out, another film came out called The Northman by Robert Eggers. And Robert Eggers was seen, and I think he is an artistic filmmaker, and in many ways The Northman was seen as a very expensive, a big budget art house movie. And when the Multiverse of Madness came out, there was a very startling shock of the AMC in Times Square and all the showings. And I think it was on every screen, and it was showing every hour, and it just pushed all the other films off the schedule. Just this one piece of sludge, like the Blob, which I know there's a scene, isn't there, in the famous Blob, both films, where the Blob invades the cinema. And it kind of almost feels like that. It's just this sludge invaded an entire multiplex instead. And this awful film made by a great filmmaker just took over completely. And so people said, oh, well, we need to see The Northman. If we really care about cinema, we need to see The Northman. And I was very proud of a grammatically incorrect, but I think philosophically astute sentence that I wrote in response to that idea of voting with your wallet, which people always say. They say it about game studios as well. Stop buying their games, and then they'll bring out the game that we want. And then obviously what happens is when they bring out the game from a certain IP that you like, but it's a bad one with full of microtransactions, and you don't buy it. They just go, oh, there's no first for the IP. We won't make another one of those for 30 years. That's what happens, if ever. So the idea of voting with your wallet is silly. It's obscene, because the market is not this even playing field. It's not an even battleground. And people also defended it. So a lot of sort of Marvel defenders said, oh, this is just the market. This is just how it works out. This is choice. But obviously it's how can choice be a thing if it leads to choicelessness? If it leads to no, if the end point is to have no choice at all. But the sentence I'm quite proud of writing, even though it's grammatically awful, is you can't capitalism your way out of a situation you weren't willingly capitalised. It looked good when I wrote it. You can't capitalise it. I didn't say capitalise. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, I realise now that I shouldn't be as proud of his sentence. You can't capitalism your way out of a situation you weren't willingly capitalismed into. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? So, and what do I mean by that? It's just that we are not the people in charge in capitalism. There's this illusion that it's the consumer that's in charge. No. Wake up, you zombie. I think Doctor Strange becomes a zombie part of the way through, and it is almost like this, so yeah, part way through Doctor Strange 2, as I'll call it from now on, he does actually become a zombie, and it is like a callback to the Evil Dead in some ways. But it's just a callback. It's completely empty and hollow. The film itself is a kind of zombie. It's like Sam Raimi film with no soul. Back to it. So I made some conclusions about this, about art, about content, because really, as I said, this grey sludge, it's content. That's what it is. And content's purpose is to find a gap in a market or a gap in the cultural landscape, fill it up, and reap money or value from it. Whereas art, it arrives and we don't know what to do with it sometimes. Art is created all the time, and normally the only person that art serves is the person who created it. And that's absolutely fine. I think, if anything, we should celebrate that, because that person is not stuck in this routine of swiping their phone or something else upwards. They're having, I think when you create art, you are doing better things with your time. Now, I will finish on that note before revealing to all those bloody cretins the truth of whether Dune has a post-credit scene. Okay, so but before that, I'll get back to this idea of swiping and the kind of nullifying effects of swiping upwards and jabbing, and it is something. Now, I say I have an encyclopedic knowledge of Freud, in the sense that it resembles a single encyclopedia entry on Freud. It's just very shallow, Wikipedic even. But Freud had this thing called the death drive, and sometimes it's interpreted, the death drive, as something where someone is just close to death all the time, man, and they're just like, they're just wild, and they're just like, they're base jumping, and they're driving cars really fast down a motorway on the wrong side of the road. And they're just hardcore, man. They're just like near the spirit of death. That can be one way in which the death drive can manifest. The death drive is ultimately connected to the Schopenhauerian concept of the will. So the will is something that is innate, according to Schopenhauer, within the human spirit, and it often manifests as the will to power, the will to so because we're alive and we feel this will, the will is almost like this call to action, this call to domination, even this call to kind of assert ourselves, to assert our existence, and the death drive is a sort of nullification of that will. It's seen, I think, by Freud and others as almost a defence against the will. The will, Schopenhauer himself did not see the will as a good thing, and so the will sometimes has to be diverted, you could say. And so the death drive really is a kind of denial of the will. So that's what it is. You're sometimes standing there you feel like you have to do something. You can't just sit there and do nothing, because the will rises up. You must do something right now, and so you kind of divert it into this behaviour. Compulsive behaviour is basically another form of the death drive. You're mindlessly surfing, and you're kind of feeling you're kind of responding to that urge to do something. Don't just be still and content with your life. But then you're diverting it to this action that kind of sates it. Doesn't quite defeat it, doesn't satisfy it, but just ultimately keeps it from kind of making you feel, I must do something right now. And in that sense, it's almost quite hygienic. And maybe we shouldn't beat ourselves up for consuming sludge, even though we can kind of cast a derisive eye at those that create the sludge. But I think art is another way of dealing with this. You are making something, you are doing something. Now, I think that kind of will to power perhaps gets caught up in the art when we expect our happiness with our art to depend on whether it takes over the world, goes viral, makes a lot of money, makes us famous, becomes popular. I think we need to divert that. I think art is can be quite a healthy way of responding to the will to power. But we should move on to the next work of art very quickly, rather than being caught up in how that work of art performs. I think that's the healthy, mentally hygienic way of doing things. So I do believe that art has that role. And I think that's something that differentiates art from content, which is when you're making content, it's almost like it's the other end. It's you want to dominate the world. You want to kind of make money. You want to make something that becomes popular. But you can't, because you can, but it's not healthy. It's not healthy for the people that consume that content, and it's probably not healthy for you. It's probably healthy for Mr. Beast, and I think that's the thing, if you are trying to make stuff for Mr. Click, as editors call him or her, but really, let's say the jab, if you're trying to kind of harness the jab to get more popular and be successful, you're in competition from people who genuinely find joy in that. People who genuinely are interested in that, and that is their art. That is their way of bringing something from within. And so that's how I feel about Mr. Beast. His passion is to create stuff that goes super viral, and he wants to see what makes it like that. So there's no conflict there with him. Whereas for others, we want to create something, we know the things we want to create, and we know that there's a need for other stuff that isn't the thing that we create. And so we try to make the thing that we create more like for content. And I think that's the problem. And I think that's what happened with the Marvel movies and how they became sludge. Now, obviously we've had Barbenheimer, we've had the success of Dune, and we've had the success of Everything Everywhere All at Once as well. And I think that's an important one, because it disproves that idea of we must all go to see the Northman and show the studios the kind of thing that we really want. No, it doesn't work like that. But there was, after lots of people went to see Doctor Strange 2 and probably left the cinema thinking, yeah, I'm not sure I want to see the next Marvel film. I think it was one of those, I think unfortunately The Marvels, which is meant to be an alright film, but I think after Doctor Strange and then the Ant-Man film, which was I haven't watched it, but it's the latest Ant-Man film was very sludgy. Lots of unfinished CGI and stuff like that. Something that's not really fulfilling a purpose. It's made because it's keeping a juggernaut rolling, or it's getting it to the end point of the next big film in the franchise. It's filling gaps between TV shows, and ultimately it's there just to churn out more content. I think even at a tool, it can go anywhere from a little article to a massive film. That urge remains. So yes, I think there has been a kind of turning away from that, but there was a lull after Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and in that lull, a little film called, which to be fair was released by A24, which is a studio which has a profile. I think did A24 do The Northman as well? They might have done, but A24 had this film with Michelle Yeoh and an all kind of Chinese cast mainly, and about Chinese family and particular issues. A smaller budget, and it ran at 10 screens, and then it got pretty good buzz. Opened at a few more screens. The buzz continued to build, opened at a few more screens, at the point where no one was really interested in watching Doctor Strange anymore, and so it opened up in the multiplexes, because the multiplexes saw the buzz, wanted a piece of that. Now you could argue that, well, that's another way of the market working, choice working. I don't know. I just think that a gap opened up, and I think there was luck. If it was released at the same time as Doctor Strange, and everyone said, go see this film instead of Doctor Strange, it would have done, I personally think it would have flumped. So it was just good timing. When people wanted something different, and it gave them something different, but it gave them something different at the right time, when the big corporation didn't have something to shove down all of our throats. It kind of got in at the right moment. So I think that's important. And I'm going to reel things back now. So we've talked about the Freudian death drive, we talked about everything everywhere all at once and the importance of art. You know what, I think I've pretty much said everything I want to say, so I'm going to keep it short because I have domestic duties. He says keep it short, it's 40 minutes long. So those are the thoughts I was going to have. The other thing is I'm going to do something next week. Hopefully I will have time to do the video because I think it will be a good one. Hopefully this was a good one too. And that is that I'm going to I'm going to continue these ideas, and I started brainstorming it yesterday before I published yesterday's essay. So a lot of the ideas for next week's article are already swimming around in my head, and I don't want them to come out of my mouth now. I want to save it for next week, so maybe next week's one might be a bit epic, and I need to make sure there's lots of room on this camera as well. So I am going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed my little talk. I hope it inspired you in some ways, informed you in other ways, made you feel entertained and clever. That's really the purpose of this thing. Unlike those idiots that I'm about to bring in right now who are skipping to the end of the video because they actually want to know if Dune Part 2 has a post-credit sequence. So I have to deal with them now. You're great. I love you. You guys are my bread and butter. You know that. You guys. I know I'm only getting I'm not even breaking 100 views with these videos yet, but you know, I'm enjoying them, and I know that some of you are enjoying them too. So that's what it's about, isn't it? That's what it's about. We're making a real connection right now. But now I've got to go back to the sludge portion. So thank you for watching, guys. Got to deal with the other people now. I love you. Have a good one. You can stop now because it's just going to be revealing. Okay. Go on. Next video in your feed. Oh, you're looking at the thumbnails. You know you've already arranged what you want to watch next. You watch that. Go on, you watch that. Go on. Bye. 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 Okay, counting down. 3, 2, 1. Hello people that want to find out if Dune Part 2 has a post-credit scene. God, I just had to deal with all those pretentious people who just think, oh, I watch video essays. I'm so much better than everyone else. You know what you want. You know what you want, and I'm going to give you what you want right now. I have much more respect for you than those pillocks that I've just had to deal with for 40 minutes. Why do I have to do this? I'd rather just cater to your needs. So I'm going to do that right now. No. No. It doesn't have one.